Names I have encountered as first and last names, non-blood family. That's right. So outside of my blood family, these are names in my life story that have come up a number of times in both first name context and last name context. They are Tanis, Lindsey. So today is Monday, 27 January 2025. I'm Tanis Leonhardi, she, her, hers of Seattle. I'm going to talk through two names I have encountered in non-blood family contexts a number of times. Tanis, 5+. Lindsey, 2+. Non-blood family. In the course of my life, that may make my life story if I were to write it as a book and or set of books. The latest addition to the names discussed here was before the end of June 2022. Each of these names I have encountered in both first name and last name contexts. Right. I apologize to anyone referred to in this video if they are actually my blood family. I have not introduced any of these people to my blood family. So like my blood family, these are people that are in my life story that nobody in my family can say they've met through me. All right, so let's start with Tanis. Elementary school classmate. It was a first name. We were often paired together in attacks by bullies. They would, you want to marry Tanis. You want to, you get, and there was other stuff that it's like identifying to his last name, but there was, so that we would get bullied individually and then together. So, yeah, so that was a very, yeah, memorable. And then let's see, undergraduate studies. So this is college level. First name, 2 times French Thomas. Yes. For real. Same project. Okay. One was my supervisor and advisor to one of my for one of my undergraduate theses, and the other was a research part of the larger study. When I presented at a conference in California in 2014, us 3 on one poster meant 60% of the authors were either Tanis or Tanis, and the other 40% were Alaska affiliated. It was it's like one of those things where people just kind of like looked at it and were like, it's either Tanis or Thomas, namespace, or Alaska for the affiliation. All right, and then graduate studies. First name, so when I entered my department for my first attempt, my current only attempt at a PhD, it was in geophysics. We, coming into the department, they wanted to get us through our qualifying exam, which is how I became a PhD candidate. And so there was an mentor and mentee. And so since I was the person who was trying to get through my qualifying exam and become a PhD candidate, I was the mentee, and they had a system where they paired us with somebody who had already become a PhD candidate, and I was assigned. I went from a thesis advisor named Thomas to my mentor Thomas at the University of California, Berkeley. He was assigned as my in-department mentor to help me succeed in passing my qualifying exam / advancing to PhD candidate, and he was successful. So it was the second Thomas I had in a mentor role in science / mathematics, and I would probably say, in reflecting on my time at the University of California, Berkeley, there's no, aside from, you know, the ones I lived with, because I lived with my class, like the people in my department, that once I got an apartment that we shared, and like my office mates in my cohort, outside of that, he was the most impactful person on my entire life. For my fellow graduate student body, Tom. There's a lot of you guys, so I have to, if you're okay with being in that book, I have to figure that out. So he and the Thomas who was my undergraduate advisor for who was my advisor for one of my undergraduate theses, it's a battle. They're number one in the Thomas namespace in my life for their own way, for non-blood family. Okay. All right. So it's a namespace where the impact on my life story has been high and profound, highly competitive. Okay. And I'll get to that part of this. So those are first names. We'll get to, and so I'm gonna now go over to Lindsey, undergraduate classmate. First name, we were both from Washington State, Puget Sound area, spelled Lindsey. and we were in the same major at the same university in Hawaii. She was part of my, I think, graduating class even. Yeah, we'd spent a lot of time talking to each other in the student lounge. All right, and then graduate classmate last name and Scottish clan name. Yeah, so my blood clan, Scottish clan I was accepted, the person who wrote that letter trying to kick me out of the University of California, Berkeley, he accepted 2 students. It was me and a man named Lindsey. Tanis and Lindsey and Tanis. So, yeah, and he was part of my class of 9 of us that entered, and so we assigned us Fellowship of the Ring status. Each of us, I was Pippin, and he was Frodo. Right, so I briefly had the same advisor/supervisor, and he pointed out one time we were rivals. I'm of the Scottish clan Gordon, and Gordons are rivals to Lindsey's. So, yeah. Over a decade ago of my own finding, thinking Lindsey Sterling might be my blood sister, and babies were switched at birth or something or later in life, and so that's a first name, and that's a she, and that's kind of a like. That's not an in-person interaction one, whereas the other 6 I've described thus far have been. And then in 2018, 2019, I was like, the abundances, because, you know, working on my CV and stuff like that and looking at my life story, and I'm like, I got a bunch of Thomases and Lindseys, and like, they're very high impact, and these are not blood family members. Like, I could actually bump family members out of my autobiography because these people have had so much more impact on my life, right, than anybody of that name in my family. So, sorry, Tomas Sean, like, but in any other, my soulmate's named Thomas, but like, I'm not talking about them. I'm not invoking soulmates here. This is like, okay. Anyway, so in 2018, 2019, invoked one more space for each or related in my life story as defined based on the Lindsey clan rival situation. All right, that takes that. So the Lindsey clan and Gordon clan, that goes back centuries, right? So that's the kind of thing that when that comes, and he even said, you know, we're rivals, right? Like, to my face, right? That takes over like anything, right? And then Lindsey, my classmate back at Hawaii, is like, don't forget about me. You got space for one other Lindsey. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna cap it off. I got room for one more Thomas and one more Lindsey. So could be open to family or non-family, that no one in my family named Thomas nor Lindsey that I was interacting with at that point in time. Same as today. So there was nobody in my life in my blood family named Thomas or Lindsey that was interacting and present in my life back in 2018, 2019. So I was like, let's open it up to anybody, right? So then if I have a blood family member with those names, you got to compete to get in my life if you want my life story. So that's 2018, 2019. So essentially, if there's somebody that they're cut out of my life story, autobiography. All right. And this is Lindsey Sterling, and she's working her way in. Okay. Kind of thing. All right. Thomas, surname, and so these are my definitions for inclusion. So Thomas, surname in either female and or trans, preference for first name starting with an L, and they have a T and L in their first and surname initials. Like me, I'm T and L. So I was like, since I'm a Tanis, it'd be cool, and that there's a Thomas, it'd be cool if their other initial was an L, so we'd have the same initial combinations. So mine are T and L, and not in science/mathematics. My base at the time was like, if I really want to diversify the namespace in my life story, maybe somebody outside of science mathematics. So that got filled real quick. Spot filled in the first half of 2022 by swimmer Leah Thomas. Sexual orientation is central to her life story, similar to me, and I was tuned in when writing and publishing. At the time, about a swimmer she competed against in at least one race, right? So she's got the L first name, Leah, T, Thomas last name, right? As a last name instead of a first name. So that's the last name Thomas here. So I've described first name Thomas as last name Thomas. And then it's not a man. And then that criteria is like, yeah, right? And then not in science/mathematics. And then for Lindsey, this spot got filled as well. Lindsey, for first or last name starting with an L, it did not have to be the name Lindsey. It's kind of namespace, kind of like I counted Tanis or Thomas on the poster. So Lindsey or blank. So not in science/mathematics, my base at the time, and had to have an Alaska connection to be representative of my volcanology work I presented, with 60% of us either Tanis or Thomas and 40% with an Alaska connection. So essentially, Alaska connection with an L, and that'd be fine. So this spot was filled in 2021 by the first Alaskan swimmer to win a medal at an Olympic Games. She swam the race I swam all 4 years in high school, the 100 breaststroke, and won a gold medal, and that's Lydia Jacoby. So Lydia Jacoby makes my life story, if I can write it right. And she takes the spot of yet another Lindsey, or a blood Lindsey, reintroducing over the corresponding times scale. So yeah, these are common names in my life story, and I actually took time in the last decade, the 2010s, to be like, spots open to anybody, and they were taken by non-blood family members, so it's kind of fun. So the names I've encountered is first and last names, non-blood family, Tanis, Lindsey.